So, RawMat and Standing for Truth have been on my radar for some time now. They popped up on one of my responses to Erasmus in my comments and proceeded to display that they don't have any idea what they're talking about. At all. Today we're going to cover Matt's failings on taxonomy. Welcome to the Nexus. Matt fancies himself a competent scientist of sorts. He apparently has or had a health channel that I haven't seen yet, but I would at best classify him as a nutritionist from what I know of him. I wouldn't actually consider him credentialed or qualified to speak with authority on genetics, evolutionary biology, or any other field of science he has misrepresented, including taxonomy, as we will see. In his limited defense, though, I am no expert either, nor do I claim to be. I know a good deal, but I know my limits, and as well as when I'm about to overstep them, at which point I will find the relevant peer-reviewed sources and make sure what I'm saying is accurate, even if that means reaching out to credentialed individuals. Whether I am right or wrong initially largely is irrelevant, as by the time I release something, I make sure it is actually accurate. I'm also going to Sergeant Adam this bit because I think Matt has thick enough skin to handle it, and as far as I'm concerned, he's earned it.
A scientist clipped together 5 physical features that humans share in common with apes to swindle man into that family. Basically, they played a language game.
We're already off to a shitty start here. See, those 5 traits weren't clipped together or arbitrarily selected. Evolution changes the surface faster than the core, i.e. the skeleton. Because of that, surface features, while they can be diagnostic, are largely ignored in favor of core commonalities, Matt. The 5 traits here are not the only ones, and I named some of the others in this video in other clades leading up to the great apes. So let's see what his problem with these traits actually is.
What is funny to me is that these 5 things that we share in common are actually vastly different when we look into detail. Let's look at them, shall we? Marx in 2009 said, "Apes are something that have no tail, a fused tailbone vertebrae, a large brain, and a rotating shoulder." Well, let's actually look at these things in detail. Our jaw is parabolic in shape.
Our jaw shape isn't the diagnostic characteristic, Matt. Pay attention to what you cite and subsequently don't fucking bother to mention after a distraction I cut out about post offices. What was the first diagnostic trait listed again? Oh yeah, the shape and pattern of the molar, which is shared with no other animal group on the planet and which only apes have, and that includes us. Maybe you'll pick it up on the next one.
Can our shoulder rotate? Sure, obviously. But here's the thing. When we investigate this, we find that the human shoulder blades are actually unique to humans, having a combination of better lateral orientation and scapular blade shape.
Not really getting how this works, are you, Matt? Yes, human shoulders are unique to humans and better suited to things like throwing. They still rotate, and so do other apes, which have the same basic setup we do. Ours is just more refined by natural selection, same with our scapula. You're making an issue out of literally what is expected of evolution. We are the ape lineage that happen to get the larger brain and more refined shoulder, among other changes.
Is our brain larger, like in other apes? Yes, but our brain is actually much larger than all other apes, with multiple different neurons found in no other primate. For example, humans have the rosehip neurons. No ape has this. Not to mention the orphan genes that are highly expressed in the brain of humans, but not in primates.
What is your malfunction, Matt? Really, I want to know. The trait is a large and complex brain, as in brain to body mass, of which humans are in the top of the brain game along with the other apes. I have to think this kind of thing is deliberate, because I can't see you misunderstanding this much and fucking up that hard accidentally. As for orphan genes only present in humans, again, no surprise, pal. Not like our genome wouldn't have them, especially given our divergence times from other lineages. These unique genes are produced by mutations and are nothing new and are to be expected.
Apes are not a clade. Ape is an English word. It is not a taxonomic term.
Neither are the words fish or monkey, Matt. What's your point?
English words do not need to be monophyletic. French, German, Russian, and other languages do not have to accord with English in the ways of splitting up animals. Taxonomy is international. Everywhere worldwide, we recognize human beings as part of mankind, not apes.
There's that word kind starting to worm its way in here. Setting that aside, though, the reason monophyletic terms are now used instead of paraphyletic ones is because of their inaccuracy, which results in exclusions of known descendant lines, like dinosaurs being a subset of diapsids, but paraphyletically excluded from the next known descendant group of birds. That's why we transition to a system of monophyletic clades, because it is more accurate. When you discuss science, use scientific terms, not colloquial terms found in various languages, Matt. This is why the worldwide scientific community has come to the consensus that we are apes. Regardless of how far up God's ass you want to shove your head, that's not going to change. This isn't an appeal to majority or authority either. We're talking about objectively verifiable evidence based on morphology, embryology, and genetics that legitimate scientists have scrutinized for years and found no error with.
It is useful to have languages that can make these distinctions. So if we must accept that humans are apes, then we must equally accept that chimpanzees are monkeys. And these ignorant people at the zoo who are pointing at apes and calling them monkeys are actually right, and I don't accept that.
Describing things paraphyletically is not useful to science, as we've already established, and I don't care if you accept that apes are a subset of old world monkeys like us. Your irrational denial of facts, unfortunately, is my fucking problem, because you're influencing people who don't know better with what are more often than not lies.
I see value in portraying the truth and precision about phylogeny, and for that purpose I have taxonomic terms, and I will not allow it to be including humans as apes.
I don't give a shit what terms you want to allow or disallow, Matt. You're talking about science, so you will use the correct terminology whether you like it or not. Equivocation will not fly here. I'll call it out like I did that lie you tried to tell about the jaw being the diagnostic trait and not the teeth in it. At this point, I am wondering if you have anything except the equivalent of nuh-uh or this is the word that I prefer to use. I'm waiting for an actual argument here, Matt, something worth refuting that I haven't covered already.
Humans are known as mankind, not apes. A child can tell the difference.
Certain evangelicals have already stated that even a 5-year-old can tell. The computer identifies that cheetahs and cougars are essentially the same thing, that they should be in the same genus. That's the data from the genome. A computer, not just a child can see that, but a computer can see that. A computer doesn't have to have any human biases or assumptions.
Yet, they do. All programs need a model to run. A computer only knows what you give it. If it's looking for just a sequence, it's going to show commonality, sure, but is that all that's really required to prove common ancestry or relation? Of course not. It's just one small piece of the puzzle that evolutionists want to blow out of proportion and use it as the prime example of why everything is related.
I love how you included a clip of Aaron from Pelagia's channel that explained this, and you subsequently ignored it, so let me try. Take this cladogram, for instance. This is more than 2,000 separate genomes from all sorts of life. The computer was fed the genomes and told simply to render based on similarity, and it made this. No looking for specific things to match up, just the genome and the name of the species that it came from. This is objective verification of what we already knew before it was confirmed genetically, so your objection is dismissed accordingly as worthless bullshit.
Which is ironically pretty funny, because Ernest Mayr back in the 60s predicted that because evolution must be true, that all living organisms shouldn't share any genetic similarities between each other, because deep time would have separated them by far too much. Decades later, though, it was discovered that they share many genetic similarities. So his prediction was removed and forgotten, and now it's used as one of their best pieces of evidence for evolution, when in reality it was a falsification of it.
Your slide doesn't show any of what you just said at all. It is addressing how to determine what a species is, not that there should be no genetic similarity between anything. At least get your slideshow game on point and have it relevant to what you're talking about. Come on, man. Even before the first genomes were sequenced, we knew there would have to be similarities based on morphological characteristics alone. We just didn't know how close those similarities would be. I looked for the source of the prediction you said that he made and found nothing. Abso-fucking-lutely nothing. No mention anywhere of this prediction at all, and genetics was realistically still in its infancy, having only sequenced bits of a few things and full genomes of a handful of plants and animals, when Mayer died in 2005 at the age of 100. As I've already caught you in one lie, and I can find no trace of this prediction he made anywhere, then until you give a proper citation, I'll call this a lie too.
I'm promoting the idea that we use taxonomy for what its intended purpose is, not to insist that English do the job instead. We aren't apes, and it's okay to tell your children that chimpanzees and gorillas are apes, not monkeys, because that is what is true and honest. Humans are part of mankind, not the ape kind.
We are using taxonomy for its intended purpose, Matt, the classification and organization of life. As such, humans are apes, and that is okay. That means we have a proud lineage, billions of years long, of survivors that lived through every extinction event this planet has had and become the dominant species on the planet. Meanwhile, there's no such thing as a kind because we were not magically created, and neither was anything else. To prove the point, you should try to explain why we have MYH16 in our genes when it is broken and doesn't do anything in us, but we share it with all other apes. Have fun with that. I'm still waiting on an adequate explanation from Erasmus, but he gets some leeway for his own personal reasons.
The classification of humans as great apes is also dependent on historical contingency. Remember, we have no existent sister taxa. In the not-so-distant past, humans shared the planet with other races of humans that are now gone. We know them as Neanderthal and Denisovan. The secular camp believes these are ancient ancestors to humans.
Wrong. Science does not view Neanderthal and Denisovans as ancestors of Homo sapiens. They are a sister species of Homo sapiens, as indicated by the cladogram you showed in your slideshow. That means that they were a distinct subspecies of human, which we as Homo sapiens were interfertile with. We didn't cross paths in that manner often according to genetic sequencing, but by the time it was all said and done, Homo sapiens had won out as the dominant human species, likely due to our social structures and specialized tool usage, which the others apparently lacked. And I'm going to go ahead and get in front of this now, even if there had been some of our sister species to survive into contemporary times, our taxonomy would not change. We are at this point moving from paleontology to anthropology, which gives us a clear look, along with genetics, at what our relationship with them was like. Primitive they may have been, but so were we, really. We just got ahead because of a couple of advantages our brain offered us that they didn't have.
But it's nonsense for taxonomists to lump humans in with great apes. The differences are far too striking. This is why they choose simplistic, vague similarities to call us apes and force us into that cladistic category.
No one is forcing anything, Matt. You, me, and every other human on this planet meets all of the diagnostic traits to place us in the same clade as the other apes, and you have yet to demonstrate otherwise. We know we are different, but that's not the way taxonomy works. We look for core commonalities, not every little difference. If taxonomy worked the way that you propose, we would be considered different species. Since that's not the case, and since relatedness can be shown with a suite of characteristics, then you are going to have to find a way to deal with what that entails, and your preferred method seems to be earplugging denial.
Evolutionists are always trying to strengthen their arguments to make evolution sound true because they have no actual physical evidence to prove that it is true. nor their ability to prove deep-time phylogenetic trees they draw are real.
Well, those are both full-on lies. There are more than 10,000 peer-reviewed articles covering all the evidence for evolution that you either can't find or won't look at. I don't know which. Google Scholar is your friend, though the technical jargon may be more than you can handle. So maybe a collegiate level text on the subject, but I don't think you're ready for that either. Also, regardless what Gould said in the late 70s, we've come a long way in paleontology since then, with the last couple of decades yielding more finds than ever before, rendering many lineages, including our own, essentially complete. Morphology, embryology, and genetics are all individual lines of evidence that individually can show evolution to be a fact, but collectively make the theory quite literally undeniable, and one of the cornerstones of modern biology.
Imagine if all of the different branches of science had their input into helping build these trees. What a disaster that would be.
This is going to be some grade A fucking insanity. He knows full well why this isn't what taxonomy is. He's just strawmanning the science to make it sound less legitimate.
Let's take the skunk, for example, and compare it to a human. Well, we have similar solitary lives until we find a mate, and so do skunks. So scientists would toss them on a related branch on the phylogenetic tree. But then a geneticist would come along and notice that the skunk is not similar to us in the fact that they have 50 chromosomes and humans have 46. So we would get removed from that branch. But then an anatomist would come along and notice that skunks have body hair and so do humans. So they would add us back in on that branch. But then a taxonomist would come along and would remove the skunk again from the tree branch because we are not in the order of Carnivora. Then an ethologist would come along who notices that they are active all year round and so are humans. So they would add us back into that branch. But then a zoologist who notices that they have an anal scent gland which is used for a defensive weapon. But humans don't have such a thing, so they would move us away from that branch. But along comes a statistician who notices that they are found in most states, just like people. So they would move us back into that tree branch. But then a kinesiologist would notice that our body movements are not very similar. So they again would remove the skunk from this tree branch. But then a homologist would notice that they all look the same, just like newborn babies, moving them back into the branch. But then a pathologist would notice that skunks carry spreadable infectious disease like rabies, but humans do not, so they would get removed again from the branch. But then a mammologist would say skunks are mammals, and so are humans, so they would put them back into the branch again. But then a linguist would notice that a skunk doesn't have anything beyond basic communication skills, never producing language, so again they would be removed from the tree branch. But then comes along an anthrozoologist who notices they don't go in hibernation, just like humans, so they would be back added into the branch. Do you see where this nonsense is going? The more you investigate, the more phylogeny breaks down.
Holy hellfire, what a jumbled mess of bullshit that was. Good thing that is not how taxonomy works, and you know that, Matt. This has got to be the biggest straw men of straw men I have ever seen. Of the 12 things you named, 13 if we count your initial unnamed field, only a few, including geneticists, taxonomists, and some input from zoologists, and maybe, just maybe, some input from a kinesthesiologist would be considered valid. The rest are meaningless and unrelated to the science of taxonomy. Statisticians and linguists, Matt? Seriously? What the fuck is wrong with you? You know, if you actually spent more time studying this subject instead of gorging yourself on worthless apologetics, your jabs might land a little closer to home. Are you even trying?
Of the 49 Tree of Life drawings in Evolution 101, not a single tree, 0%, includes the name of a single common ancestor, let alone even explain how the first male and female had to arise at the same time.
I don't know what trees you're looking at or talking about since you don't fucking show them, but let's see what I can find. Since you mentioned Berkeley, let's check there. And just as I thought, they do show common ancestors in their trees. So you're either using outdated information or lying again. I think we all know which I think it is. As for the division or emergence of male and female sexes, that has been a thing since the first gamete cells came along literally billions of years ago. You seem to think that evolution teaches that an ape-like ancestor gave birth to something that was fully human, and it needed another fully human female to survive, which is both wrong and idiotic. Evolution works on populations with gradual changes to the point where you would not notice a substantial difference from one generation to the next. An analogy I like to use is taking daily snapshots of yourself from birth to present day. Looking at two pictures from a day apart or even a few days won't yield any noticeable changes, but photos 6 months or more apart will. In this analogy, each snapshot would represent an entire generation, and the principle is the same. No storytelling either, as evidenced by the impressive fossil record we have, which you are hell-bent on ignoring.
Our model is far superior, and the more we investigate the small things, the more profound this becomes. Just look at the vast physiological differences between us and primates. But if that's not good enough, then listen to what a forensic investigator has to say just about hair, and just how different ours is, and different from any primate on Earth, even our supposed closest ancestor, the chimp.
What model, Matt? The one with God magic creating everything and an impossible flood all within 6,000 years when we know full well neither of those events happened and that the universe is more than 13 billion years old, with the Earth itself being more than 4 billion years old? That's not a model. That's superstitious bullshit from the Bronze and Iron Age, written by people who were ignorant of the way things actually work and is not rooted in reality at all. As for hair analysis, it is an unreliable field and has been known to be unreliable since before 2015 by the FBI itself, as testimony on microscopic hair analysis contained errors in at least 90% of cases. That's a pretty big red flag that it's junk science. Microscopic comparison, as in looking at the hairs under a microscope for visual comparison, was deemed highly unreliable as early as 2009. So you'll forgive me if I skip this 7-minute or so presentation featuring what is regarded in legal and scientific circles as junk science and is about as reliable as you creationists giving a definition of kind that doesn't constantly fucking move around.
What most people don't know is that taxonomists also have a problem of their own. It is called taxonomic boundary paradox. The concept for a taxon today is that it can overlap in the past, according to evolution theory that they now believe in.
Looks like you need a lesson on the history of science. Yes, Carolus Linnaeus was a creationist Christian who lived a century before Darwin and didn't know evolution was possible. He tried to classify life according to his original 7 ranks. Even in his time, he still classified man as an ape and apes as human because he could not find a diagnostic characteristic that would separate man and ape from the same taxonomic family. As I mentioned in the video either you or Standing found your way to, his challenge to the scientific community of his day has yet to be answered despite your piss-poor attempts to do so in my comments section. In his time, his 7 ranks were not only paraphyletic, which we've already established is inaccurate, but it could not handle the sheer volume of specimens that needed to be classified, and was expanded with a few other ranks, but that still wasn't enough. So the system had to be changed in a way that still accounted for all the data that Linnaeus had been right about. He set out to find and classify those elusive creative kinds you guys still can't name, as in a lineage completely unrelated to anything else, beginning with a special magical creation. The branching tree pattern he discovered instead, and wouldn't be explained until Darwin published his theory, was and still is valid and undeniable. The modern cladistic system is far more accurate, however, which is why we transferred over to it. It has since become a twin-nested hierarchy using both morphological character traits but genomic sequencing as well, which has corrected a few things we were already pretty close on. Those minor errors don't disprove the theory, mind you.
Linnaeus did not believe in evolution, just variation within major groups, which is what creationists accept today.
Yeah, Matt, I already said he didn't know about evolution. I'm also aware that he only accepted what would be properly defined as microevolution because of that. You just don't realize or ignore how speciation and macroevolution is an extension of those same processes over a longer time scale.
But we know today what the truth is. Gene sequencing has shown that humans are nearly all identical to one another, no matter how far back you go in time. It doesn't matter if you're looking at Neanderthal or Denisovan or where in the world you go to test people alive today. We are all related, contrary to what evolution predicted and taught to the public.
That's another lie. To prove it, I want you to show me a single secular text, because I don't give a shit what creationist sources say, that says humans the world over are not related to one another. Failure to do so will show that you've lied again. I don't think you can, because evolution never taught that.
If people ever ask what makes humans different from apes, make sure to give them the list that I provide for you with this video.
I had to zoom in considerably to even see what you included in your slide. An actual link would have been better, but not a single one of the traits that you listed means a damn thing taxonomically. Yeah, the things you listed make us different from apes, but none of them make us unrelated to apes since you can't grow out of your ancestry. You would have to find a trait in the past that moving forward separated us from apes, not things in the present that don't mean shit or separate us from the ape family. You failed, and spectacularly so, to refute anything. Your incredulity, weak apologetics, and science denial are not evidence against the best supported and most scrutinized theory in science. It's just you being a dumbass holding on to ancient superstition for some emotional reason. I cut out that bit about bestiality because I have standards on my channel, you disgusting fuck.
Taxonomy was first invented by a Christian creationist, so we own the hierarchies that evolution tries to use against us today.
The fuck you do. You guys don't have any claim to anything in science as if it's something that was stolen from you. These are scientific concepts that anyone is free to explore and question, but if you want to overturn more than a century and a half of objectively verifiable evidence in the field, then you have a shit ton of research to refute, and it's going to take more than your misunderstanding of the entire topic to do it. If this is your A game, then you ain't got shit, pal.
Until we eventually get retarded arguments like, "Are you a eukaryote?" implying that if we are eukaryotes, then we must also be everything in between the first eukaryotic organism and humans today.
Well, are you a eukaryote? You are, and that's easily proven. You are also a bilaterally symmetrical coelomate, a tetrapod, a therapsid, and literally dozens of other things just like me. We both have the same ancestry, and it wasn't a golem spell that began our lineage, Matt. Most of what follows is just more of the same, with Matt showcasing how he straight doesn't know anything about genetics, but I do want to touch on this.
But remember, that 98% number that you always hear in the press is pure fiction. We are not 99% related, and the number is told to the public to make it look like we're kissing cousins.
I don't know if this is simple ignorance on Matt's part. I gave Erasmus the benefit of the doubt on this point a while back because he is young and obviously hasn't done much investigation on this. The percentage of similarity depends on if you're looking at the whole genome or just the coding and regulatory sections. The discrepancy comes from how we quantify these differences. Do we count a whole duplicate section as one change? Do we count a series of deletions as one? And do we count them differently from single point changes throughout the entire genome? We're still working on that, but that does not change that at the high end, we are 99% similar to chimps. You can bitch and moan all you want, Matt, but that won't change the data. If you have a problem with that, then that's just tough shit. Bring something to the table worth considering that hasn't already been debunked. Until then,